I think game development is the most interdisciplinary art form, because you have to have the artists, you have to have the audio, so the composer, you have to have the writers, and then on top of all of that, because for like an animated cartoon, you also have to have all of that, so it's very, very difficult, and you also have to have people who figure out, okay, um, how is the main character going to dress? What is the scene going to be like? So you have all these things that you have to think about, but it's very similar to like making an animated film. But then for video games, you also have this interactive element. Okay, so how is the game played? How does the player interact? So all of this interaction stuff. So that's called game design. And then on top of that, you have all of the engineering stuff. So how does that actually, translates to code, and how does it work on different platforms, on different consoles, PC, mobile, whatever.
So great to meet you here on Zoom, Aleksandar.
Great to meet you too. Hi.
You can maybe just tilt your screen just a little bit so that you more understand. Yeah, that's better. That's great. Yeah. Good. Aleksandar, I'm so happy you agreed to talk to me, because this is a field that I've never spoke to anybody. You're the first game developer that I'm speaking to. And
okay, cool.
Yeah, and a world that I know very little about, apart from that my son plays games.
Okay, interesting. Well, I've been playing games since I was a kid, so it is for me very something very common and normal. And I actually wanted to do video games for like when I was a kid as well, so it was
really
a very easy career.
So is it, are you, as a child, have you been creative? Did you see when you played games, could you already then sort of see in your mind games how you would have wanted it?
Yes. I mean, when I was very small, I had the Game Boy, the Game Boy device, and I was even making my own levels with like dominoes and Legos, and I was thinking of, okay, how the platforms would look, and jumping with the little Lego guys and so on. So yeah, I was really always interested in thinking of something new with the games. But then, of course, when the personal computers came by and you could actually do something on the computer yourself, then I was trying to figure it out. Of course, when you're a kid, you can't really figure out how the whole video game is done, but slowly you figure it out. And today, actually, it's much easier than ever before, because you have all of these tools that help you, so you don't even a lot of people who do video games now, they don't even need to know how to program, because you have like tools. So making a video game, sometimes it's like making a PowerPoint presentation, you just drag stuff, you put, okay, this goes here, he goes like this. So you just, use your mouse, and there is no coding. There's just, like very simple engine work. And these engines are really made super simple today, and they're cheap or free. So it's very different than, I don't know, 10, 20 years ago.
And did you know that this is a career that you could do? Or, because you think of, video games, is this a career? So did you already know that there's a possibility?
Well, it was a bit weird, because not a lot of people do this, especially, when you're a kid, you don't hear about this. You say, okay, I would like to do that, but you have no idea, is this a career? Do people do this? Can this be like a full-time job? And especially because usually, like with movies as well, it's not a career for one person. Usually you need a big team, you need someone to do the art, someone needs to write, someone needs to program, someone needs to do this and that. So where am I going to find a huge team to help me, or a small team? And do these people even exist, and so on? So these are all big questions that, now it's very, it's known that you can actually have a career in video games, and a lot of, especially in my country, in Croatia, there's a lot of hype about this, because, we had a lot of Croatian games that were big successes internationally. So a lot of people know that this is something you can do, and And a lot of kids today actually just start into game development. There's even schools for this, universities for this, and so on. So it's very, very different. But when I was a kid, I mean, I wanted to do it, but I didn't know if it can be a career or not. But I at least a hobby, you know.
Yeah. But what do you think it is about Croatia that you say that all these amazing games came from there?
It's a good question. I think well, I was thinking about it a lot, you know. So definitely one part of it is that we have a lot of very creative, talented artists because of the we had, you know, the Zagreb School of Animated Film. It was actually Zagreb Film, which was the state studio back when we were a communist country. Of course, everything was state owned, but the studio was the first one to win an Oscar outside of America, you know, for a cartoon. So we had a lot of these, artistic people working on cartoons and graphics and so on, animations and so on. So the tradition is very big for some kind of audiovisual art, you know. And also at the same time, you have a lot of very high quality engineers, you know, people who really understand engineering well. The university for engineering is really, really difficult, and one of the best in the region. So when you combine these two, so you have a lot of like visual artists who are really good at animation and 2D and stuff like that, and then you combine them with a lot of great engineers, then you probably have the good recipe for
Yeah.
making video games. Yeah.
And this is now interesting for me because you say, okay, you work together as a team, and you also draw the link with engineering and the animation and so on. So these games are actually tapping into a huge different or different types of creativity. You know, it's not just
Yes.
the game development.
Exactly. So uh, I think game development is the most interdisciplinary art form, you know, because you have to have the artists, you have to have the audio, so the composer, you have to have the writers, and then on top of all of that, because for like an animated cartoon, you also have to have all of that, so it's very, very difficult, and you also have to have people who figure out, okay, um, how is the main character going to dress? What is the scene going to be like? You know, so you have all these things that you have to think about, but it's very similar to like making an animated film. But then for video games, you also have this interactive element. Okay, so how is the game played? How does the player interact? So all of this interaction stuff. So that's called game design. And then on top of that, you have all of the engineering stuff. So how does that actually, you know, translates to code, and how does it work on different platforms, on different consoles, PC, mobile, whatever. So all of these questions are very uh, yeah, difficult. And then the most difficult part is combining them all into one, you know, uh, piece of art, which is the thing that everybody's trying to do, like make a video game which when you play it, it seems like it's a holistic piece of art. So it's not like, okay,
Yeah.
beautiful artwork, but I have a gun and I'm shooting. So that's really not, you know, like not a
Yeah.
logical game.
Yeah, and I think for people from the outside like myself, you know, you hear about the games, but you don't really know uh, what what it entails. And also, I mean, I just hear sometimes, you know, with my son playing, you hear the music, and the music itself is already something that I would listen to just on its own, you know. So yeah, it's interesting. All these I didn't realize all these elements that had to get together, or all these people that had to get together to make a game. And then you always have to challenge the mind with a game like this, isn't it?
Yes. So well, I like to compare it with the movies, you know, because everybody watches movies, even people who don't know anything about video games. It's easy to make a connection because, most of the movies, you know, when you go to the theater, are pretty basic, pretty, you know, stupid, maybe even, you know, like, okay, there's some villain, there's some action happening.
Yeah.
And a lot of kids and teenagers and young people go there and watch it. And that's most of the stuff you see on the theater. But when we talk about film as an art form, we don't talk only about action movies, you know, with shooting. We talk about all the different kinds of drama, historical movies, romantic movies, experimental movies, science fiction, fantasy, whatever. And it's very similar in video games. So you have a lot of stuff that's under the surface. So of course, kids are usually going to play some kind of action, and you when you I don't know go to your kid and see what he's playing, it's probably, I'm guessing, some kind of action.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's the same as in the movies. If you're like a very if you're a gamer who is interested in other things, there's the whole independent scene, like in the movies, like there's this indie scene, indie game development, and they are making really interesting things with really interesting topics about, there's a game where you go through, I don't know, one game that was released a few years ago was called This War of Mine. It's actually about the war in Sarajevo, but you're not a soldier, you're a civilian, and then you have to survive because the city of Sarajevo is in it's it's in a siege, so you can't get out, but you have to survive inside, and then you talk to people, you share resources, you have to find other people, and so it's very different perspective on war, so it's very interesting what you can do with video games, because the video game gives you, the joystick in your hand, and it doesn't always have to be that you're carrying a gun, so these kinds of things are important. Also, like games that really change the idea of what gameplay can be, what you can do in a video game. So games that change, not just gravity or time travel, because that's really basic, but you have games that, give you the ability to change the rules of the game.
Oh,
There's
okay.
a lot of very interesting stuff is happening in this scene. But of course, you have to understand this is a very young medium. This is like there was no video game 60 years ago. So we're talking about something that's quite new. Almost nobody who makes video games has already earned their pension yet. So it's very young.
Yeah, if you think of it that way, it's true. So you have
So
no reference. You really don't have reference like in the films. You have reference to the past, but in games you don't.
you have something, you have the
Yeah.
80s, you have 90s, but 50 years is not a lot. If we say that the movies began, with the first simple films, like one scene films
Mm.
in the 19th century, maybe 1890s, then, you know, uh, Kubrick or, the big directors, that we talk about today, it might be Hitchcock, maybe, or the French ones, Godard and so on. They all came, in the 50s and the 60s, So that's like 50, 60 years later,
Yeah.
after the start
Yeah.
of the industry. So we're still not there yet as a game industry, probably, There are some things that we've learned, like how to do good gameplay, what to avoid, because these things were actually big problems when you play adventure games from the 80s or the early 90s. They still didn't know how to make them very enjoyable, but not in terms of technology or art, but just in terms of game design. So if you didn't pick up an item 5 hours ago in the game, and it was a key, and you have a locked door now, you just have to play the whole game again, and that's horrible. That's a
Oh, I
horrible
see.
experience.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
and of course, after a while, people figured it out. Okay, we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't make people play the whole game again. So we should always make something that you have to somehow pick it up in the beginning, so we know that you have it later. Otherwise, people are going to get frustrated, which is not a good experience. So, of course, the whole industry is learning, same as with every other industry, So you have all the masters that figure out, the perspective and everything, and then you just copy them and try to, move it a little bit forward. And each of us, every studio is trying to do something a little bit. We use the same genres, action, adventure, strategy, whatever, but we try to innovate a little bit, just move it a little bit further.
So is it fair to say that the game industry and the film industry are going to move closer together?
Might be. I mean, when you look at the current state, they're very, very close. For example, Cyberpunk 2077, that's the name of the game. It's a Polish game made by CD Projekt Red. They made The Witcher before. Witcher is, of course, now a TV show on Netflix, but Cyberpunk, I mean, they had so much success with Witcher that they had a lot of money to do the next one. And they decided to do this Cyberpunk game, and they hired Keanu Reeves to play in the game. So you have like a character who is literally Keanu Reeves. He looks like him. They made the photogrammetry trick where it's literally him, and he talks like him and so on. So he's an actor in a video game. And even before, even if you look at games in the late 90s, you had Medal of Honor, which was directed by the cutscenes between the levels, in the war game, so it's like World War II. The cutscenes between the levels were directed by Steven Spielberg, which is like really interesting. He wanted to try this out.
Yeah.
And of course, a lot of composers from the movie industry tried to go into the game industry, and so on and so on. It is very close, and especially when you take in maybe too close, because it's a different medium, and too much inspiration from the movies makes games feel more like interactive movies than something other.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
For example, if you play The Last of Us. The Last of Us is a game that's also now a TV show, but it's very easy to become a TV show because literally the game is just, you're watching like a movie, so it has like all the movie grammar and vocabulary. So you have like the camera is looking like this or like this, so you have angles, you have lighting and so on. And actually, just at certain points, you have to, like do some quick time event, click something at the right time so he avoids something, or choose whether he's going to say something positive or negative to a person. So it's like an interactive movie. And people love it, of course, because they are familiar with the format. Okay, I'm just sitting down on my sofa and watching a movie, and sometimes I click something. So it's a big success. But in terms of the medium, the art form is about interaction, and it's not about just sitting down watching and sometimes choosing something. So for me, it's more interesting when you have video games which really try to do something strange with the interaction, just pull you in. I've talked to a lot of people, what's your favorite game? Even kids, when you ask kids, what's your favorite game? And he says, Spider-Man. And you ask him, okay, what do you do in this game? And it's very interesting to hear the explanation. It always starts with I. When they explain the movie, it's always he. In the movie Spider-Man, he jumps around.
Yeah.
And in the game Spider-Man, I jump around, on the webs. So the experience can be very different. It can be very subjective. It can, depending on the topic, of course, it can really change your perspective on things, bring you to a more deeper understanding of someone else's position. If you put yourself in the shoes of, there are wonderful games. There's a game from Austria. It's called Way Out, but it's not the French a way out. It's just Way Out. So that's about this guy who is escaping. He's a refugee. He's trying to escape. I think Iran or Iraq or something. And he's and you just play his whole journey as he goes from one country to another, and he tries to get to Austria, and all the stuff that's happening to him. And it's really, in certain ways it's fun, in certain ways it's a little bit sad, but as you're playing as him and you're doing some choices, some of them are hard choices. Sometimes you do something that you feel bad about and so on, but you understand how it is. So it's interesting.
I never thought about that. And how important is that? So it's a way of sort of having empathy with a character because you are playing that character then.
Yes. And much more so than maybe other media, than reading a book, it's different actually, but I think in this difference there is something that can be done very, very interesting. And I think that it should be done. It's not just a medium for kids to have fun. It's called a game, and then the first thing you think about, okay, it's games, so you're playing with it, and it's just for play. But usually things evolve, and this can also evolve into something really interesting, clever, and thought-provoking. As you said, maybe empathy-provoking as well.
But do you think that it also in that sense it's a positive? But do you think it sometimes these games takes us away, or the children, young children, away from doing things in reality? So you'll find games, for example, where I remember my children used to play this farming game, and then you plant things and they grow sort of instantly, and it's then if you go into reality, if you plant something, it takes weeks to start growing, and that you lose that sense of reality a little bit when children only do that.
True. It's something that's actually been around for, in my opinion, a long time. So you had people who were bookworms, immersed in books, and just reading books and not really engaging with the real world. And this was a big problem actually, with the 18th century and so on. And then when you get to the 20th century, you had these so-called couch potatoes. So when you got the television set and the VCR, and you had you can go to the video store and just get any kind of VHS tape and watch any movie or any TV show. And you had people who were just sitting down and watching TV. And of course, it's not the real world. It's much different, You watch a TV show like Friends, and okay, great. It's like I have friends, I know them, I know their jokes.
That's so true. I didn't think of that. That is so true.
And now it's video games, and now kids are sitting down and playing video games, and this is really an age-old problem, and there has never been any solution. Parents usually have the solution of saying, enough TV time. You only have 2 hours of TV every day. I remember this, in the 90s. Yeah, I had some. And also some imaginary things like you're going to lose your eyesight if you watch TV too much. Which helped a little bit, I guess. I didn't watch TV so much. And the same thing now with the video games. So, of course, it's very smart to limit something, because people can really become addicted to certain things. And especially, so since the video game format is, we're living in the 21st century. So everything is digitalized. The data is very much available for the developers to check out and tweak. And since everything is, downloaded digitally, they can tweak it and update it within a day, And of course, the independent developers, the indies, they don't really care so much about, squeezing every last second of attention. They really want to tell a story, but when you go to these big corporations, they actually employ psychologists, sociologists, mathematicians, statisticians, people who have a job to figure out, with A/B testing, with a lot of these different mechanics and methods, how to make people glued to the screen more, to your game and not to another one. Which is obviously because they want you to spend more time in it and at some point start spending money in it, like maybe either watching the ads that show up if it's a mobile game, or maybe buying some extra things, So of course there is this incentive, which is a market incentive. So it's really triggered because of the market, for the companies to create games which try to, as much as possible, be addictive, So it's not a side product, of like it's just an addictive show or just an addictive game, but it's deliberately addictive because they feel they can, get more cash out of it. So that can be very problematic, of course, and certain things in Europe are already being, regulated. So just like you have the regulations for the casino, for the gambling industry, we are starting to see regulations for loot boxes. Loot boxes are this thing in video games where you can buy, for a very small amount of money, maybe $1, maybe a few dollars. You can buy a box, but you don't know what's in the box. Maybe it's a very stupid thing that you already have. Maybe it's some super unique, rare item like a big sword or I don't know, a great cap, that nobody else has. So the sort of gambling, you don't really get real world money, like you don't get $1 million, but you get something that has value to you because you're in the game. and it costs money. So it encourages you to keep spending on these tickets and then opening these boxes. So it's very much gambling actually. And certain people are, of course, psychologically inclined to gamble. So the European continent is trying to regulate this, saying, okay, look, if you will have gambling in the game, you have to say it, you have to explain it to the players. It can't be, blatant, and so on and so on. So this is the bad side of it, and it's usually connected with the big industry, So the big games that you mostly see people playing, I don't know, Fortnite, stuff like that. So.
But yeah, these psychological things, it's anyway with shopping as well. They're trying to manipulate you to buy more or to buy certain things. So that's all over. You cannot just blame the gaming industry for that.
No, yeah, it's the market economy, and it's just is the way it is with the big corporations. Me personally, I just try to avoid it by being in the part of the industry that's more about the creative side in the indie scene. Yeah, but it should be said that this is a problem, But yeah, you're right. It's everywhere.
Yeah,
It's
it's
literally everywhere. If you watch a TV show, there's these TV shows with like hundreds of episodes, and every episode, like these soap operas, every episode ends with a cliffhanger, So you can't just stop and say, okay, I have some closure.
Yeah.
No, you in the last minutes they give you something which is like, oh no, I have to watch the next one. So of course, it's an age-old trick. Yeah.
But I'm talking also to artists about education, about the fact that art is so much less available in the education system, that art subjects are being pushed aside. But as we were talking now, I was thinking how interesting that children are playing these very intricate, complicated games, yet if you look at the school system, for example, that's not really being incorporated. And couldn't it be an amazing tool for example, subjects like history that children always find so boring, that that gaming could have that side, that it's actually educationally based.
I agree. There is some movement in this. So the big French company Ubisoft, they do the series called Assassin's Creed, right? Which is, some Assassin's Guild is going through time, and they're going to different areas, I don't know, ancient Greece or Egypt, or well, in every title they go somewhere else, and there's already like 20 titles or so. And Ubisoft is very connected to the French state, and they have educational programs where they just tweak their game a little bit, because they spend a lot of time making it really realistic. So it's a really realistic city in ancient Greece, and then they just remove all the combat, all the jumping and all the stuff like that, and they actually can walk in a city in Greece and see, okay, so this is how it looked, this is how people worked, and so on. So it is actually used in French schools. It's part of the program, and I think it's called just like Assassin's Creed educational version or something very simple to find. And they do use it, and kids really like it, and they get more interested in it, because they can actually, walk around this, and it's easier for them to understand something very, very far away and different when they're there, But of course, it depends on what you want to convey with history. If you want them to know all the dates and everything, it's still hard work sitting down and remembering the dates. But if you want them to have like a feeling of what it felt and what it was like to be in Greece, and then later in Rome, and then the Middle Ages, and then the Renaissance Italy, and so on and so on. I mean, these Ubisoft games are wonderful for it, because they really have the whole thing, and it's all really, really well made, and so on. So yeah, that way you get something that's important, and that's like a sense of where we are, because even memorizing dates and years doesn't give you that innate sense of, okay, this is how it looked back
Exactly.
then, and this was the
Yeah.
progression, and that's why we are here, which is, I think, one of the important lessons of history.
Mm. And you find that some children have a specific interest in a specific era. I think it's also um, not everybody is interested, say, in ancient Greece, but they are maybe interested in another era. So it gives them then the opportunity to explore these time periods more.
Yeah, I mean, they also have. That's why they're so good, because over the decades they've made revolutionary France. They've made 19th century Britain. All of these very different games, which are really so. For the revolutionary France one, this is such a great story. People don't know it. So, do you remember when there was this big fire in Paris several years ago, and the famous church
Oh
was
yeah, yeah, I remember.
Notre Dame, I think.
Mm.
And they made before this they made the game, and it was called Assassin's Creed Unity. I think it doesn't matter. It's the one in Paris. And for the game they created a very realistic replica of the church. Inside, outside, they used the photogrammetry methods, so everything is completely like every detail is recorded in the game. And after the church burned down, they actually contacted the Ministry of Culture and they told them, look, you can just rebuild it. We have everything, we have everything how it looks
Wow.
and so on, and it's much more details than
How
photographs or something.
amazing. Oh, you
Yes,
give me goosebumps now. This is amazing.
it is, and it's just an accident, because they could have made some other city, but they just
Exactly.
made this
Yeah.
one like few years before the fire, and it was a good accident, nice accident.
Yeah. But and it just shows you the amount of detail that goes into these designs,
Yeah.
designing these games, that they really go into um, the smallest of detail.
Yeah, I mean, Ubisoft is really famous for that. Some studios, they don't really care so much.
Oh,
They just
okay.
put something, and
Mm.
it happens to me that I was playing two different games. And it didn't only happen once. It happened to me several times that I'm playing completely different games and I see the same rooms and the same assets. It's okay. Not everybody is really so involved. They just say, okay, look, let's just find something and put it in. And there are some big studios that really, really want to put attention to detail, because well, a lot of people who go into the gaming sector are enthusiastic about it. They play games as kids. They want to make the best game ever. They want to be part of it. So you have a lot of goodwill, a lot of people who are really, really excited to work in this industry. And well, sometimes that's abused, and so people work from day to night, but they really, really, have this even artistic wish to make something perfect. And that's why you can have like the exact replica of Notre Dame or whatever. Yeah.
Amazing. But I see also that they have like competitions, like gaming competitions, and they're quite huge. I mean, they have audiences and everybody, and they run through a few days where they do these gaming competitions.
Yes, the esports. It's like sports, but with esports. I think that I've never watched this kind of stuff. Not my kind of fun. I don't even watch regular sports. But for me,
Okay.
it's all the same. You're sitting down and you're watching 2D screen of certain people running. Whether it's football and they're running somewhere in the real field, or it's FIFA and it's a game and they're running in a digital field. For me, it's the same. I'm sitting down and cheering. So I
Yeah.
personally don't really have any fun watching this, but it is a big industry as well. So people have their own favorite gamers and they're watching them and cheering for them. You have teams. Some games are, of course, much better for this competitive kind of play. So usually some kind of war games and fighting games, actions. or card games. There are digital card games as well, or racing games. So these games are obviously very easy to translate into some competition form. But there are games which are, of course, completely different, like games which have a narrative, like story games, where you have some story which goes from the beginning to the end, like Tomb Raider, Lara Croft,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
like games which you couldn't really play competitively because it's just, you have to experience the story. There is a big subculture of these gamers who love to play games competitively and so on, and be the best at it and so on. But I would say it's a small minority of video games that allow this. So it's very small. Most people play games for themselves, and to get fun, to have fun, and so on, and to get some cool experience and so on. But yeah, since this is such a big thing today in our civilization, yeah, there's also like these big competitions, and of course we didn't mention all the streamers. So there's people who just play the game and stream it online. And since they're such nice personalities, I don't know, I don't even know these streamers, but the kids love to watch other people, like streamers they like, play the game. So they
Oh,
don't play
yeah.
the game
Yeah.
themselves, they just watch other people play the game,
Mm.
and they feel nice about it because it's a cool guy who makes jokes while he plays, and so on and so on. So there's also a part of it. So there's like this whole, I would say, maybe ecosystem, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
which
Yeah.
is happening, now uh, all around video games.
Mm. But now, Alexander, tell me about your work.
Okay, good. So I've started working in the game industry 10 years ago, and we've been doing, and some 5 or 6 years ago, I've decided to make my own games, so
Yeah.
open a studio of my own, gather a crew, and do something interesting and creative. And we
But
started.
did you go and study game development?
No,
Okay.
back then there was no game development studies.
Oh, okay.
There is now, actually.
Yeah.
But so the main thing is, I wanted to also like do something a little bit different, as mentioned. Uh, so I took a very, very old genre of video games, which is point and click adventures. These are games where you have some kind of puzzles, and you have to click on different, items or people or something
Yeah.
to figure out how to solve the puzzle. Maybe there's a guard who won't let you go through, but then I don't know. You talk to him, you tell him the right thing. Oh, look, there's something on the back, and then he runs over, and then you can go through. So a little bit
Okay.
of a
Yeah.
puzzle game. So these games were very big in the early 90s. So you had the Monkey Island series and well, a lot of the Sierra games and so on. So it was very big back then. Now, not so much, of course, but I wanted to do something else. So the first games we made back in 2017, 18, 19 were, we called them interactive comics, because we took this genre of like puzzling out the solution and we put it in a comic book format. So you actually you get like a comic book strip, and it stops at a certain point, and then you have to choose what the character does to figure out a way out of it. So there's a hungry dog that won't let you go through the fence, so you have to go to
Oh,
the
okay.
meat place, buy some meat, and then you throw the meat
Oh, I
to
see. Yeah.
somewhere
Yeah.
else, and then
Yeah.
when the dog is not there, you can go through. And it's very simple stuff like that, but we put it in a comic book format so that the players actually build their own panels of the comic book as they're playing, and once they've gotten through the whole narrative, they're they're done with the story. The cool thing we did was you could click a button to print out your own comic book the way you played it.
No, not that kind of game. A casual game, one you can finish in half an hour. No, 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 no. Stop assuming things and let me finish. This is an easygoing game, about an easygoing guy, in an easygoing diner. You know how these stories go. A diner pops up down the street, it's open 24/7, you buy an all-you-can-eat coupon and you never leave. But the next thing you know, it's 10 years later and the diner is closing. What do? Well, you could get a job. No, of course not. You get to the bottom of that nonsense. Through cunning, through quick wit, and no, not violence. I'm sure you noticed by now this is an interactive comic, but what you really need to know is that once you're done, you can print what you played, put it on a coffee table, impress your friends. Neat, huh?
And then, of course, you get the
That's
PDF and you have a printer.
amazing.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it really looks nice with the front page, with the back page.
Yeah.
It's really nice. So this was the first thing we did. I did the
And
program.
what is it called?
That one is called All You Can Eat. The interactive comic is called All You Can Eat, but we did some more afterwards. One is called Vape Escape, and so on. And there's even some that were never finished, but we could finish them and release them quite soon. But what happened after 2019? So we did a few of them, and we said, okay, let's try to do like something bigger, because these are small games. There's no animation. It's just like comic book panels, and usually it's me writing them and programming them, and my colleague was drawing them. But we did get into some kind of money, and we said, okay, now we have some amount of money that we can do something other than just the two of us. We can do something that also has animation and more complex programming and a more complex story. So let's add more people to the team and do something bigger. So the idea I had for the bigger game, which is out last year, it's called Paws of Coal. So it's very difficult to explain. Paws like the animal paw, and coal is a coal mine. So Paws of Coal. So it's an animal game. So all the characters are animals. About rabbits working in a coal mine, and they're in the middle of a strike. And this
sounds like a comedy.
It is a little bit funny, but also it has
its humor. Yeah,
it has its humor, but it has the themes that are important, So it has like working conditions. Also, there's like this disease. The rabbits are getting some disease, and some of them are very sick, and it's becoming a big problem. And they're calling you. So the player is a hedgehog, and the hedgehog has to come to their aid. So he comes to the doctor and says, okay, I'm going to help. I'm a very good scientist, and I'm very clever about these things. And you're trying to help figure out what's causing this disease, among the rabbits. And and you have all these very interesting things. So you're trying to help these rabbits, by freely helping them, because you're asked, because you're a nice guy. And they say, look, if you help us for free, the next time there's a disease, maybe you won't be here, and it's not a good play for us. We would rather that you get paid by the director of the mine, which is some badger, some huge badger. And then you have this maybe social problem where you want to help them, because they're all getting this disease, and it's really not good for them, and they're sick. But they don't want you to help them, because if you help them now, the next time there's a disease, you won't be here, you won't be in this city, and they're just gonna, have this problem again. So what they want is a precedent that the company, the coal mine company, will pay for the solution of the crisis. So it's so you have to go and negotiate with the badger to give you some money, and of course the badger doesn't want to do this, because if he does it once, then there will be like a precedent that he always, whenever there's a disease, he has to pay to solve it. And this is not something that he wants to do, because of course he wants all the money from the coal mine, and so you're in this weird, even political space, and it starts off like a very funny Animal Kingdom cute game, and suddenly you're confronted with, oh, okay, so interesting questions, which were of course born out of the fact that the game was made in the middle of the pandemic, and all of the questions regarding, the public health and so on were important to everybody.
Yeah.
And so so there's just one part of the game, but that's the let's say that's the core part of the game. They're trying to help these rabbits, solve their crisis. And the gameplay is for me also very innovative. We try to do the gameplay in this way. So you talk to people, you examine things. So you examine the table where they ate the rabbits, and say, there's a little bit of rice there, so they ate some rice. At least these guys who are on this table. Then you go talk to the this other rabbit. So what did you eat yesterday? And he says, oh, I can't remember. Maybe it was salad. And then you write all these things in your journal. And the thing is, you have to, as a scientist, you have to make some kind of scientific hypothesis, you know. So from these clues, I gathered that they all ate this, you know, or they were all exposed to the carbide lamps in the coal mine, or they all drank this exact wine, you know, yesterday, or they all played cards, and these cards are made with this special ink, and this ink is problematic, blah, blah. So you have to find some kind of way to explain why exactly these rabbits are getting sick and not other rabbits. And then when you combine this in your journal, you know, with lines, okay, this goes with this, and then you go to the doctor and tell him, okay, I think I've cracked it, you know, this is it. And if you didn't, then it's bad, you know, it's, oh, it's even worse. He's getting worse now. But if you did, then, oh, great, you're such a great scientist. Thanks so much. And you're getting a little slight bump in your reputation. And then the idea was that as the game progresses, and there will be more games in this series. So the first one is this one that came out last year.
But how amazing, because you're also tapping into all these different things, into, like you say, a little bit of politics, a little bit of business, a little bit of management, and it's very interesting. And then that creative problem solving.
Yes, a little bit of science. Yeah, so this is what I think is important in the gaming industry, to just not just do yet another clone of a game, you know. So I mean, I did like when I was a kid, those games like Diablo 2, you're some big warrior, you're fighting the devil. I mean, it's great, but I wouldn't make just another clone of it, you know, okay, you're fighting the devil, but, you know, he's even bigger, you know, whatever. But I want to make something different, you know? So something that pushes the boundary. Okay, we didn't see this yet in video games. So that's why we did the interactive comics. That's why we did this strange scientific gameplay. That's why we wanted to add this, you know, like game which looks cute with the animals, but then gets political and managerial. So that's it. Right now we're doing.
But I just want to ask, why specifically rabbits and the hedgehog? Why these animals?
Well, so of course it's a long story actually. So we have a very we first made a huge big storyline with like. Much bigger and more impactful story. And then we said, okay, but it's really too big. It's too huge to tell. But for me, it's very interesting. And this big storyline was about all the different animals being in a hierarchy of animals. So the lion is the king, you know, so you have the lion king, but then you have like smaller animals are less important. So you have the caste system like you had maybe a few hundred years ago. And some animals want to break this and turn the animal kingdom into an animal democracy. And then you have this political stuff as well again. But this is like a longer story. And of course, rabbits and hedgehogs and so on, they're really at the bottom of the chain. But we wanted the main character to be like, even though he's like one of the, you know, small critters, he's very famous because he's like super smart. He's like a scientist that everybody knows, you know, like something like, you know, a famous scientist. And then that's why you are everybody likes you. Like the high castes, you know, the tigers and so on, they like you because, oh, you're the famous hedgehog. I want to, you know, hang out with you, and they're gonna talk to you. And the commoners, they're gonna talk to you because, oh, you're one of us, you know. So we wanted the main character to be. But in the end, you know, this story was so big that we said, okay, we don't have the resources, the money to pay people to work for years on the same thing. So we're just to build one part of the story at a time. So the first part of the story where we meet this hedgehog is like, okay, it's a little story where he goes to this rabbit town, which is a mining town, and he's a famous scientist, and the doctor asks him for help. And in this story, you just get a glimmer of the, you know, okay, so the big badger is the coal mine owner, and the poor rabbits have to work, you know, and they have some problems, so they're striking. So we're slowly introducing the people to the world, and then in the next game and in the next game, we're going to build on all the stuff we wanted to say.
Oh, that makes so sense. Yeah. Now I understand. Okay.
Yes. So, of course, for example, this game, Paws of Coal, it has, I think, 200,000 words. So of course, you don't see all the words in the game. You know, you talk to the guy, and then you have a list of what to say, and then you say this, you know, and then he says something else. You have a list. You say this. So you maybe see 20% of the whole text in the game. But nonetheless, somebody had to write 200,000 words, which is, you know, a lot of work, you know, and that's just the writing. And then you had to draw all the different rabbits and draw all the different backgrounds for the mining town, you know, and
so you have to put yourself into a gamer's mind. So what would the person write, or what would they want to ask?
Exactly, and you have to, as a writer of, for example, video games. So several things are different than usual writing. So first, the interactivity, obviously, you know, so you have to give them a choice, and you have to give them a choice every so often. So you can't make it, you can't just have like walls of text and they're just clicking and reading, because it's a little bit boring. So every few sentences, you know, if the guy is saying something, after every few sentences, you should be able to interject and ask something else, you know, or some side question that's interesting to you. So even that already informs how the video game narrative is different, you know. So it's very chunked out. You rarely will see like a big monologue, you know. In a book, you can see a big monologue. Somebody goes on stage and talks, and even in a TV show, you know, like, I don't know, the old Star Trek shows, and then Captain Picard speaks for 5 minutes about some problem, you know. So monologues are usual in other media, but in the video game media, they're frowned upon, you know, because you want short texts so that the player can at some point write what they want to say or click what they want to say.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And then again, after the answer, again, you want something. So this part is different. You have to be very careful not to do, this is called the combinatorial explosion. So if for every, I don't know, 3 choices, you have something that the other guy says, and then you can do another 3 choices. So that's like 3 times 3, that's already 9 different things you have to write. And then after that, if you have 3 more choices for each of these, there's like 9 times 3, that's 27 things. So it really explodes. So you have to be really careful not to go on a tangent, but somehow return these things back to the narrative, you know. So even if you say something completely different, somehow the narrative will come back to what is actually important, you know. So maybe you're interested in this little trinket in the shop, so you ask about that, but it should somehow close up and you should come back to the real story, you know, just because of time.
Yeah. So all the games that you played, can you see that you have tapped into that, you know, that there are things that you think from certain games that you think, okay, now this worked great, you know, so when you write yours, then you use that.
Exactly. We were inspired by a lot of games, and you can see that. The main inspiration was the new game called Disco Elysium. It came out in 2019, so about the time we started making our game, Ark Fantastic, which was the big game, which we then have to make smaller, and that's the Paws of Coal game. So Disco Elysium is for me. I mean, it won all the awards. It won the BAFTA award for best game. It was one of the best-selling games of that year or any year. And it was very weird, different, strange. So it was also a great success of the creative side, so that this kind of game, which is very thought-provoking, can win over, action and other stuff. So Disco Elysium was a big, big inspiration for us. And of course, the old point and click adventures, which I mentioned, which were really all story driven. So that was very important. A lot of us in the studio actually really care about the story in games, so not just the gameplay, which is of course very important because it's the medium, but also like giving some kind of story, which has a plot, which has characters. The characters have some character arcs. So all the classic stuff you would expect from a classic story, but told in an interactive medium. So this is for us very important. That's why we were really inspired by these old games when this was a thing. And of course, the new one like Disco Elysium. So that's the main inspiration. The visuals are inspired, of course, by the local the Zagreb Film, the Zagreb School of Animated Film. We even found some people from that school, who actually drew the cartoons back in the 80s and so on. So they also did some work.
Really?
Yeah. So it looks very much like an old cartoon. If you check out the game, it's really much like old school cartoons.
Amazing.
Yeah, and that's it. Yeah.
So,
Later
and
sorry.
it gives sort of recognition also to other artists, and other, like you say, the Zagreb school. It gives sort of that recognition to them as well.
Yeah, true. And that what happened then actually is that the Zagreb Film, the studio, it's still owned by the city now. They heard that we were doing these games and that we were doing them with these people and that it's interesting. And they actually called us up and said that they would like us to make a video game about one of their like famous cartoons back from the 60s. I don't think you know it. It's famous in the old Yugoslavian countries, like Slovenia, Serbia, Croatia, and so on. It's Profesor Baltazar. It's like a very old 60s cartoon about this little professor who's solving all the different problems of the world, with his imagination. And that's a very cute cartoon, famous locally. And they said it would be really nice if we could make that into a video game, because kids today, it would be great if they could, get this character back in their lives, the new kids who just play games or something. And of course, since we grew up on Professor Baltazar, we said perfect. And so that's the project that we're doing now.
Amazing. Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that. And I think that is sort of like I spoke to a choreographer a while ago, and he was talking about building on the past, building on what was given in the past and continuing, or not just using it, but continuing it, and this is what you are doing now.
Fast forward this wonderful cartoon to the 21st century and bring it to new audiences. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So using something old and putting it into a new perspective.
But Aleksandar, this all sounds amazing that you do that and the creative work, but you have to sell this game as well. Are you good at the business side of things?
So the games, of course, they have to sell commercially. This is a little bit different from most of the other creative industries where, for the movie industry in Europe, you usually get a lot of subsidies, and then you really don't have to sell. I don't remember a Croatian movie actually making a profit. But for the games industry, it's obligatory to actually, if you want to continue working on a game, the game has to sell. We're trying to get some kind of way to around it, to figure out how to sell games which are less, which are yeah, they're niche, so obviously millions of people are not going to want to, solve mysteries of illnesses as a hedgehog. They're going to want to,
Yeah.
run around and jump on platforms. So we just kind of accept it, and say, okay, obviously this is not going to be like a huge money cow. But on the other hand, we do want as many people to play it because we think it's important. So we're gonna give it our best to have a large production value. It's gonna look beautiful and so on. But as a studio, to be able to keep the people working on it and so on, we do a lot of work for hire for others, like, okay, we do a video game on a commission for a museum, so a
I
local
see.
museum from
Okay.
Croatia tells us, look, you're obviously very artistic. Could you make a video game that we could put on our website about this artist? Could you emulate his style and then make a video game that's like in
Oh,
his style?
wow. Mm.
Yeah, and then we said, of course, yes, because that's what can, then give us some money, extra money that we can then use to make our own games. So it's a weird combination of doing something to get more money and then not using that money as profit, but using that money to invest in a video
Yeah.
game, then probably is not going to earn as much. Luckily, in the past few years, Europe and Croatia have figured out that also video games can be creative works of art, and it's not good to leave it only to the market, because then not a lot of very interesting creative works are going to be made. The similar logic we have with the movie industry. And so slowly you have some like public grants and stuff like that for video games.
Okay.
So so that's okay. I mean, there's the Creative Europe grant, which is really big for really big games, and they really want the game to be creative, innovative, with a strong narrative and good story, a good theme, good thematic, references and so on. So that's nice that they're actually funding. So in that way, you can find some funding for the game, and it doesn't have to be super commercial. It doesn't have to be like the best. Because it's very hard to find like a publisher who is willing to finance a game when they see it's not something that's going to earn millions, of course.
But isn't it great that and it's the same in the film industry, that smaller creators, or I say smaller in business wise, that they have the opportunity, and that's actually what people want right now, that more authentic type of smaller, also smaller audience. I know it's not about the, it's not so lucrative, but in the long run, don't you think that's more as if you'll have your loyal supporters then?
Yes, I agree. It's a good strategy, actually. Getting people who like your games to follow you and to can't wait to get your new game, and it's a stable amount of people. I agree. That's a very good strategy, and we are also trying to do that.
But tell me, Aleksandar, what are the wishes now for you for the future?
For the future, well, definitely we have to finish the Profesor Baltazar game. And then, of course, sit down and see what's the next thing, what's the next big thing we want to do. So one obvious solution is to finish what we started. So finish the big trip, the Ark Fantastic story, where the Paws of Coal game was just the first thing, and then we have like more games. So that's one thing. Or maybe go in a completely different direction and say, okay, something completely different has popped up in our minds. So since we started with Profesor Baltazar, I've gotten a lot of interest from different comic book or movie or different intellectual properties, or how do you call them, different brands that came to us and said, okay, let's do something in this famous storyline. So maybe we're going to go in that direction. So it's very difficult to say. But definitely we're going to stay in the independent sphere. We're going to stay in the narrative sphere. We're going to try and innovate and so on. and that's a given, right? That's not going to change.
Mm.
But the exact projects, this is something we'll all have to see together.
Mm. But amazing work you're doing. You've really opened my mind now to the gaming industry. I should really not be saying this to my son because he's been trying to convince me of all the advantages of gaming. But now I do know, and I think it's amazing. And I think really there's a great how can I say, it could be really used in education so much more, I think. And yeah, it's lovely to know that.
Yes, well, I'm glad. You could do some research and try to recommend to your son some video games, that maybe he hasn't played. Of course, how old is he now?
He's 27.
So that's good. I would recommend if he hasn't played, that 27 is perfect because that's when you can actually understand the deep topics. Kids that
Yeah.
don't get it. So then Disco Elysium definitely. So Disco Elysium for me is one of the best games made like in the history of video games.
And where can you get the claw of
Paws of
coal?
Coal. Paws of Coal, yeah. Paws like, little animal paws.
Yeah.
This game is only available on PC, so personal computers, and you can get it on the platform Steam.
Okay.
But it's very cheap. I think right now it's on sale, so it's like $1 or something, and usually it's
I
like
see.
$5. So it's not really a lot of money, but it's also a very short game, so you can finish it in several hours.
And this game I'm interested now in this game that you did with the first game that you did with the comic book strips.
All You Can Eat.
I want to go and see what it looks like. Yeah.
Yes, check it out. It's a black and white comic book game, all you can eat. And the studio that made it is called Gamechuck. Because if you Google all you can eat, you're just gonna find a million restaurants, all you can eat restaurants. But try and just write all you can eat Gamechuck. Then this is the company, and it's going to come out. All right.
Yeah.
So I hope you'll check it out and like it.
I'll definitely do. Yeah. But thank you so much for your time. It was really wonderful talking to you.
No problem. No problem.